Sunday night edition of the Anaheim Calling podcast. We are back for our last show of the decade?
Yeah,
Question mark.
yeah.
I believe that the Ducks play on, let's see here, I think they play again
No,
on Tuesday.
no. We probably
Or no, that's right. Yeah, it's the last. No, they play on Tuesday at noon.
yes,
And so we might do a shoot. We might do
potentially.
a show that day. Still to be determined, but let's just call it the second to last podcast of the decade if Tuesday will be the last one. So, a lot to talk about here. There were two games over the weekend. Friday, the Ducks played the Golden Knights, won that one 4-3, and then dropped a 2-1 overtime decision tonight, Sunday night, against the Philadelphia Flyers. So, both games at home after the Ducks came back last weekend from their Eastern road trip. But first of all, I'm just going to put this out there. I hope everyone had a great holiday. Hope everyone enjoyed the time with their family. I know I did.
Mm-hmm.
Jake, how was your little break, little reprieve from the madness?
It was good. It was good. Kind of all over the place. Not exactly as relaxing as it can be, as happens as you get older and are married and going all over the place. But finding some time to recover and relax this weekend.
Well, very good. Yeah, it's definitely can be a hectic time of year, but hopefully people can see through that craziness and just focus on what really matters. So, a little moral sob stories aside, let's actually get into the games here. So, not really a whole lot to talk about with the Ducks going into this weekend. I mean, no real roster changes. Ryan Getzlaf was for a little stretch on injured reserve, but then I think they put him on retroactively, and so he was back in the lineup on Friday. So everyone that had been out last weekend due to sickness made their way back into the lineup, and it actually made for a pretty good game against Vegas. Although, the shot totals were not in their favor. And you can point to maybe different instances in the game where the Ducks got a little outplayed. I thought that overall, especially against Vegas, the Ducks did a good job of creating opportunities for themselves and capitalizing on those opportunities. And this is kind of an interesting disparity, in my opinion, because if you look at the overall numbers, right, you would look at those shot attempts, 51-43 in favor of Vegas, or sorry, looking at the wrong game. But still in favor of Vegas in that game. And then you look at the actual expected goals total, looking at all situations, and it was actually in favor of the Ducks, 2.1 to 1.9.
A big part of that is the power play. The Ducks were able to really generate some high quality looks and take advantage of them in the process. And it's funny because you look at the way the game went out, and I think it was CJ or someone had a tweet basically saying, like, I have no idea how the Ducks are winning this game because on the surface, you look at a lot of the numbers, you look at shots on goal, different things like that. You look at 5-on-5 numbers. It wasn't the prettiest game in the world.
And the shot attempts were 47-25 in favor of Vegas.
And that's the thing, is that was at 5-on-5. That was at 5-on-5. And this is a game where the way that the Ducks won it, where they got they essentially got some really good power play looks. They got a 5-on-3 and extended 4-minute power play right afterwards, and they were able to bury 3 goals from that. And you can make it through a game with getting shelled if you have good goaltending and you're able to capitalize on high quality looks on the power play. It's not exactly probably going to be the most repeatable way to win a game, but it's also not a smoke and mirrors win in any sort of way. This is a game where the Ducks took advantage of chances, and this is a power play that, I mean, we've talked about we've talked about for a bit that the power play just has not been great. There's been various different issues with it, but in this game they were able to take advantage and really kind of get chances, find ways to put the puck in the back of the net. The 5-on-3, they looked good doing it. Then the ensuing power play afterwards, and they were able to carry the momentum after that. And so it's a situation where I'm not saying you throw out the numbers, but I think that needs to be factored in because special teams is a part of the game. And I know that we look at numbers at 5-on-5 for a reason. And a lot of it is because it can be skewed heavily by the power play. But I think in that fact, we are kind of in that same concept. we also need to isolate power play situations and what teams were getting and discipline and different things like that. And the Ducks were able to take advantage of undisciplined play by the Vegas Golden Knights there.
Yeah, and in a single game, looking at 5-on-5 and overall volume is just not as important as just looking at isolated moments, because those are the moments that win you the game. And so, yeah, if you're projecting out long term, it's probably not great that the Ducks got shelled as they did, notably 18-7 in the third period. But again, if you kind of flip that and you look at, for example, high danger looks at 5-on-5 in the third, the Ducks actually won that battle 2-1. And so even still, with Vegas getting the volume, the Ducks found a way to find those areas in front of the net and those danger looks. Now, looking at the lineup, though, a couple of interesting little nuggets before we get into the recap of that game. So Adam Henrique, Elite 1LW, doesn't have the same ring as Derek Grant, Elite 1C, but the Ducks seem somewhat committed to giving him that spot on the first line next to Ryan Getzlaf. So, and that trend would even continue against the Flyers tonight. So what do you kind of make of that? I mean, again, just to clarify, so he was on the first line next to Ryan Getzlaf, and then you had Isaac Lundestrom on the second line and Sam Steele on the third line. And that's a trend that, again, would hold tonight against Philly. So is that more of a look that they're trying to get with him on the first line? Is that, partially just due to Rickard Rakell's absence? Or is it just, hey, maybe Lundestrom is playing well enough to where you can trust him in that role?
Yeah. It's interesting because I think when they first tried this, I'm trying to remember who they had as the third line center, but we had mentioned, it was back when they were kind of double shifting Adam Henrique at various points in time.
Yeah, it wasn't a true lineup change. No. It was just kind of like an in-game adjustment. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's funny because we had mentioned at that point in time the potential of bringing up Isaac Lundestrom, and it was kind of, it wasn't exactly something I was super in favor of. It's turned out well. I mean, there's no other real way to put it, is that Isaac Lundestrom has been able to come up and he's been able to play a decent role and be able to fit in well. And so I think with that being the case, Adam Henrique has always seemed like a player that's more suited for the wing. He's more of a trigger man, and we've talked about that at various points in time with him being on a line with Silfverberg and Rakell, and that he's not the person creating there. He's able to be the trigger man for that line. And so I think when you put him on the wing, you remove some of the defensive responsibilities that he has as center, which I think are some of the issues with his game and why he excelled so much with Silfverberg and Rakell, because they were able to help him out with that. And he's able to really prosper from it, and whoever they put on that right wing, whether it's been Sam Carrick, whether it was, I think, Daniel Sprong for a game, they've been successful as a whole, I believe. So it's not that shocking, and it's something that's good to see. The issue is, and this is the big thing moving forward, do you want Adam Henrique as a winger with his contract, with everything like that? Is that what you want him to be if he was paid to be a second line center for you?
Right. Well, I'm going to withhold judgment on that until Rickard Rakell comes back to the lineup.
True.
And we'll see if this little trend holds. Maybe it's just kind of, hey, this is the best we got in the current circumstances. But I think it makes sense to move him at the wing, because he's not the best skater. I mean, Adam Henrique is a fine skater in terms of, fundamentals, but he's not exceptionally quick. He's not really like a straight line speed guy either. He is pretty agile down low in terms of just stops and starts and turning on a dime. But I think in the modern game, it's just tougher to be a center who's being asked a lot of, given a lot of responsibility when you're not a high-end skater, or even just like a Sam Steele, who isn't necessarily a great skater either, but he's just got those young legs. He's just faster. So it's just a little quicker, more spry.
Yeah.
And that's just the key difference there. So we'll have to see. Now, it is interesting though that, again, Dallas Eakins committing to Sam Carrick, Elite 1RW, Sam Carrick, on the line with Ryan Getzlaf. I may or may not have jokingly predicted this last year, that Dallas Eakins was going to immediately promote Sam Carrick to top line.
It seems like Sam Carrick is kind of his boy. I mean, he had
unquestionably.
Yeah, he had 0.26 individual expected goals against Vegas. I mean, that line as a whole of Getzlaf, Henrique, Carrick had a 55% expected goals percentage as a line. Expected goals for percentage as a line. So it's not as if he's been bad.
No, he's been fine. He's been absolutely fine.
Can we take a minute though to talk about the fact that I'm not quite sure why they decided to have him in the lineup as compared to Daniel Sprong?
Well, this is what I was getting to, is that looking at the Ducks lineup, you have right now, I mean, let's just use the tonight's lineup as the example. As your right wingers, you have Sam Carrick, Jakob Silfverberg, Andre Kasha, and Carter Rowney. I mean, yeah, Jakob Silfverberg is really good. Andre Kasha is a solid kind of middle six player. Carter Rowney is definitely a fourth liner. And I understand the reservations that this coaching staff and this organization has about Daniel Sprong's game, but there's just not a whole lot of offense on that right side right now. And you would think that, hey, maybe just give him more than a game or two.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't seem to be the case.
They gave him one single game against the New York Rangers.
And they gave him one single game with their backs completely against the wall.
Yeah.
Injuries, sickness. This was not, I don't think this is because of anything he really did in the minors to kind of warrant a call-up. It's just because, hey, they needed a guy, and he was just next in line. So in absence of Troy Terry and minus Daniel Sprong, who, look, we're not trying to paint as this world beater by any means, but the Ducks just don't have a lot of offense on that right wing.
I just think if you're going to compare, and this is no knock on Sam Carrick necessarily, but if you're going to want a guy to be on the first line, I don't think it's that out of the question that you want to have a guy like Daniel Sprong who's going to shoot the puck a lot as compared to a guy like Sam Carrick who's more known to be kind of a grinder type of player throughout his career, more of a third, fourth liner. So if you're going to have a guy with Getzlaf and Henrique, I feel like Daniel Sprong is more so the guy that you want there. And now, granted, I talked about Adam Henrique being a trigger man, but he's also a guy that can get in the corner and do the work for the line. And essentially, you kind of have that in Carrick also, and it's almost as if it's not completely needed. So it just seems odd. It seems very odd going to that game. And now, granted, it didn't cost them in that game because they were able to generate a fair amount of offense. Now, we could maybe get into tonight's game where we don't have to jump into the game against the Flyers just yet, but I think that there is a bit of that where if you looked at the game, there were a couple chances that if it's someone with a better shot than Carrick, if it's someone who's a bit more offensive than Carrick, maybe they're able to capitalize and win the game in regulation as compared to having it going to overtime. Because Getzlaf, in tonight's game, Getzlaf was kind of, it was almost a turn back the clock type game for him with how dominant he was at various points in time. And he kept feeding it to Carrick, who wasn't in the right spot, wasn't able to finish various different things. And so it's just odd. I think that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Carrick is a guy who did real well in the AHL under the tutelage of Dallas Eakins, and I think they even go back to the Toronto days with the Marlies, if I'm not mistaken. And so he's a guy that he trusts, and he's kind of just like one of those reliable type players who's going to be sound defensively. He's not really going to give you a whole lot offensively. He's almost like a neutral, right? Yeah. He doesn't take anything off the table defensively, but questionably doesn't really add much offensively. He's a guy who's good to have around. Yeah. Anyway, one other thing, Max Jones called back up. I thought he looked pretty good against Vegas, notably. The line, well, not so much against Vegas, but the line as a whole against Philly tonight had good numbers. And so, I think it's good to have another shooter in the lineup just to give this forward group that's not necessarily banged up right now. I mean, they are missing Rickard Rakell, and I don't know if I would put Troy Terry as a huge loss, but they are missing their kind of regular go-to offensive players.
Wow.
Well,
not even playing and just shots fired. Wow.
I mean, you're right. I apologize. They're missing all of his 8 points in 33 games.
Thank you.
From the lineup.
Thank you. Now I feel better.
those 3 goals, that goal per 11 game pace, they're really missing it.
Wow.
I'm sorry.
Yes, you should be. Real quick on Jones, that he was sent down, but it was a paper transaction. So he played
just like Yanni Hakanpää. We almost got our Yanni Hakanpää moment, but we never got it.
That was
really disappointing.
That was the weirdest thing. That was by far
he was called up per the AHL transactions website,
and sent down the same exact day.
Which is really which has become a really reliable source of player movement.
Oh, completely.
And he was sent back down, and so I'm thinking that it was just something contractual.
Real quick, this is something that I do want to put out there because I do find it odd. And, this is my platform to always talk about the things that I find odd. Ryan Getzlaf was put on IR. Yeah. I have no idea why. Because it's not as if
sick.
Yes.
He's on IR with the flu.
Yes, I got that. But the reason why you put someone on injured reserve is so that you can take advantage of the additional roster spot that you get with that player on injured reserve. The thing is, they did it retroactive to whenever it was. It must have been, I think, the 17th or something along those lines. But they didn't put him on IR until technically Monday or Tuesday, I think.
Yeah.
So there wasn't and then he was activated for Friday's game. So there was no purpose to actually put him on IR. They could have put him on IR if he wasn't ready to go on Friday and called someone up.
I have no idea. I really don't.
Well, you get what I'm saying. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, just tracking the Ducks roster and AHL player movement this week, it was just a lot of misinformation, it seems. Or not even misinformation, but just confusing information.
Weird.
Yeah.
Let's just go with weird.
Yeah, let's go with weird. I was really rooting for the Yanni Hakanpää debut.
Who should have come out of the lineup for Yanni Hakanpää?
Corbin and Holzer, I would imagine, would be the one.
And he should have played over Michael Del Zotto?
Yeah, Michael Del Zotto is in a weird place right now because they put in Holzer and Larson as the third pairing 2 games in a row.
Yep.
With Michael Del Zotto, I'm assuming, healthy and available. But, Jacob Larson, you gotta get what you can out of him, I suppose.
Tonight against the Flyers, they actually had decent numbers.
Yeah, and they actually did against
Vegas also.
By the numbers, they were the best pairing against Vegas. So what do I know? I'm just a hater. That's all I am. Just like you are with Derek Grant. I just can't show any respect. Well, getting into the Vegas game a little bit here before we are going to jump into our first break. So for those who have been asking a little bit in the Twitch chat, so for these kind of recap type pods where we're recapping, a back-to-back, we're not going to do our usual goal-by-goal analysis like we do with if it's a single game. We're going to maybe do a bit more of a general breakdown of the game, things that we found interesting, and then we may do a bit of a beat by beat if it was like a big game or something like that. So just trying to keep it concise, but of course when it will be an individual game, we'll still do the classic format. So before we jump into the Vegas game, let's just go into our first break, and we will be right back to break that down on the other side. Okay, back from the first break. So Vegas Golden Knights in town on Friday. The Ducks wearing their orange thirds. Jake, your favorite jersey.
They are.
The Ducks' current rotation.
Hey, not just mine, but it seems like it's yours also.
Is it? I mean, they're just more enjoyable to watch than the black or the white.
The only complaint I have with it, I'm actually a big fan of the dark numbers on a dark jersey, just like the Flyers. I mean, the team Anaheim calling a beer league jersey has the black numbers on the black jersey, but you got to have a really thick border on it to really make it pop. And I think that the border on the numbers is not large enough, which makes it sometimes hard to read the numbers on TV. They're very easy to see in person, but on TV it can be tough.
I would prefer those jerseys. I like the template of those jerseys, but I would like to see that be the home, but with the black instead of the orange, and then where the sleeves are, you have orange there. So almost like those Flyers thirds you were referring to that we wear for Beer League. Just slap the Mighty Duck logo on it, and I think you have a pretty solid home jersey.
Keep the orange.
Orange is the third jersey. It just is.
No.
If they're gonna have an orange base for home jersey, it needs to be a little less orange than this. This is too much.
Ginger Wolf said it's not as thick as the border around Felix. I do want to make mention we are doing our maiden voyage on a brand new computer, so there are some kinks that are being worked out, including the fact that the border around Felix's camera is very large. Sorry about that.
I don't. Is that an issue?
No.
Are we considering that an issue?
It's just bugging me. It's bugging me. I'll fix it next time.
Well, that's your fault.
It's
okay.
It's thick as Baby of Yoda is saying, with multiple C's.
Okay, yeah. Just gonna move on from that one. Yes. So, getting into our recap of that Vegas game. So, Ducks would trail. They would give up the first goal of the night to Jonathan Marchessault, who would just kind of break through. I mean, I'm not really totally sure how this play happens. I think the Ducks kind of get caught in a change. Jonathan Marchessault just slips by everyone basically and gets a breakaway, comes in on John Gibson and just absolutely roofs it. Actually double bar and in. Pretty nasty shot. And
perfect.
Again, though, this is something that I noted during the game and that didn't necessarily materialize tonight against Philly, but teams are trying to stretch it out on the Ducks. You're seeing teams attempt, and I don't obviously have numbers on this, but it just seems like teams are targeting that stretch pass on the Ducks, trying to make them pay. I don't know if they know that they tend to have sloppy changes or if it's just a weakness in their game, maybe being a little aggressive on the forecheck. And on that play, Vegas did a really good job. Marchessault flying the zone and getting a really good opportunity, a golden opportunity. And I mean, there's really no chance for John Gibson there. Yeah. Sorry about it. You can hate me all you want.
Wow. Perfect shot. Nothing Gibson can do there.
Perfect shot. Ducks go to the power play, though, a little bit after that. And this was, of course, the 5-on-3, which I believe came as a result, that's right, of the Getzlaf getting high-sticked.
Yes.
And scary moment, because if you look at the high stick, it barely misses his actual eye. It cut him above the eye, I believe.
No, on the lip.
On the lip. Well, but it came up above his eye.
Yeah,
it could have easily poked his eye out.
Yep.
And it didn't, which is good. But I think I saw, was it someone on TV may have said this or on Twitter, but the no visor decision. Thoughts?
It's Ryan Getzlaf being Ryan Getzlaf.
Ryan Getzlaf does what he wants.
I mean, because he wore a visor for a bit and he's always gone. Not always.
I think he tried that 2 years ago or at the beginning of last year.
Multiple different seasons, because even going back to must have been 2013 or 2014, something along there. He got a puck to the side of the head and had a broken orbital bone. Put on a visor after that and had his worst season ever. And I guarantee you, with how hockey players are, he said it was because he couldn't see he probably thought that he couldn't see the puck as well with it on. And so he took it off. And I think he put it back on when he had some sort of injury or something like that, but eventually took it off again. So he's not going to wear a visor. It's just not going to be the case. If it wasn't for Ryan O'Reilly, I probably would put Ryan Getzlaf as the player that would probably be the last player without a visor. But it's going to be Ryan O'Reilly.
Interesting. Okay. Well, and then just kind of looking a little bit at the first period beforehand, though, I forgot to mention at the very end of the first period, the Golden Knights would get a perfect opportunity. I almost said golden opportunity again, much to your chagrin, I would assume.
Shaking my head.
John Gibson makes the initial save, but the puck rolls to the goal line, and Hampus Lindholm manages to sweep it out of the crease. I don't think it was actually going in. It basically hit the post.
Yeah.
But still a nice alert play there from Lindholm. Now, first goal of the night for the Ducks was one of those goals that you wonder, why can't this happen more often? Why is this so hard to conjure up? And what I mean by that, the power play, right? 5-on-3. Adam Henrique just gets real low in the offensive zone, really at the top of the circles, almost at the goal line.
Yep.
Ducks make sure to really close in, shrink that kind of diamond or that triangle for the Golden Knights, and they're able to work it around, set up those opportunities, and then there's just Jakob Silfverberg going over to Henrique, who wires it home on a perfect one-timer right through the pads of Malcolm Subban, who actually looked decent in this game. I was shocked by that, considering how terrible he's been in his career. But look, this is, like you mentioned, Adam Henrique, a good trigger man, and the type of play that seems repeatable by this Ducks team. And yet I understand that the power play has been scoring more lately. And this is the kind of goal, albeit on a 5-on-3, that would lead me to believe, hey, maybe they're onto something ever so slightly in their strategy.
Yep. And it seems like, I mean, it was a great fake shot by Jakob Silfverberg. And the thing is, if it's someone who doesn't shoot that much or doesn't have that great of shot, that the goaltender and the other team basically isn't respecting it that much, then that play doesn't work as well. But the fact that it's Silfverberg who's shown that he has a pretty accurate shot over the course of his career, it makes them bite harder on the fake, and he does it well and ends up leaving a lot of the net open for Adam Henrique to find. And that's what you want. You want to be able to move the puck laterally, have guys bite, take advantage of the extra space, whether that is, as I've been harping on, off-puck movement, whether that is with some misinformation, different things like that. But that is what you have to have. And now, granted, this was also on a 5-on-3, which also makes it that much easier to find the extra space. But still, they found the look. Silfverberg made the right play there by not just shooting it and moving the puck over and making Subban move laterally.
Yeah, and it's still a pretty tough shot to score on.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily call that a high percentage play, but all things considered, it's still the kind of play, like you said, that's making the goalie move and that's getting a quick shot off. That's really kind of all you're asking for. Now, the Ducks would really drive the knife into the Golden Knights, though, with that power play, because the power play would continue after that. Now it's a 5-on-4, but Cam Fowler getting a shot through from the point and just kind of mysteriously goes off, I think, 2 bodies on its way to the net, or maybe just off of Derek Engelland. Regardless, that would make it 2-1 Anaheim. So the Ducks are able to pot 2 on that power play, avenging Ryan Getzlaf, and then they would double up their lead just a couple minutes later. Jakob Silfverberg on the forecheck wins a good battle. Isaac Lundestrom recovers that puck, gets it over to Jacob Larson at the point, who shoots a perfect shot when you're thinking about, okay, I want the forward in front to redirect it. Perfect height, just about 3 to 4 feet off the ice. And Maxime Comtois in front is able to get his stick on it, redirects it in. That would make it 3-1. And at this point, the Ducks are being outshot 13-10. And that would pretty much put the game away. Even though the Ducks are being outshot at that point, you can see these are pretty good looks that they're scoring on power plays. Perfect deflections. Now, Vegas would threaten a little bit throughout that second period. And, I mean, the Ducks, you have to say, sat back just a bit. But then in the third period, Devin Shore, with just kind of one of those hustle plays that really can spark a team, comes into the offensive zone on the forecheck, and the puck gets poked loose by Carter Rowney. It then goes back to Engelland. Shore is able to lift Engeland's stick really quickly and then just fires it on net and through the pads of Malcolm Subban. Now, I don't know if this is really a soft goal by Subban. Yes, it's 5-hole, but it was such a quick shot and such a bang-bang play. That would make it 4-1 Ducks. Now, the Golden Knights would make it interesting late with a pair of Nate Schmidt goals, but ultimately the Ducks are able to hang on and win this game 4-3. So I think it's a pretty nice kind of Friday home win. That's what you want.
Yep, definitely. And I think that this was a good win for the Ducks. And now, granted, the 5-on-5 numbers aren't fantastic, but this was probably one of the better wins for the team of the year. They were able to kind of create chances. And, I mean, the thing is, the 5-on-5 shot attempt numbers aren't great, but if you look at expected goals in all situations, the Ducks had the better of the expected goals at 2.14 to 1.92, and then when you go to 5-on-5 and when you adjust everything, yes, the Golden Knights have the advantage, but it's about a half goal advantage, and so when you factor in the power play and the Ducks taking advantage, that makes up for that completely, and so good on the Ducks for doing that. One thing I do briefly want to mention is kind of a scary moment near I think it was in the third period when Ryan Reeves takes a real hard run at Andre Kasha, and luckily Kasha's able to pick up his head and see him coming and kind of move out of the way, but That's one where...
Oh, you mean the one where he hit Thomas Nosek
yeah,
instead?
he hits Thomas Nosek.
Hits his own player. Yeah.
Hits his own player, but if he connects with Kasha, that is to the head.
Yeah. Well, it didn't happen. So.
No, it didn't, but scary moment. Close.
Yeah, nevertheless. So that was a big win by the Ducks. And just overall, I think that we saw some good things. You'd probably want to see them carry the play a little bit more, but considering the fact, and this is kind of something that is going to but really define, I think, this next stretch of games, is that the Ducks I don't know what Raquel's timeline is. I don't think we really have a clear picture on that, if he's just day to day, week to week. But right now, you look at their center line, you have Lundestrom, Steele, and Shore, right? This is not a contender type center line, right? I mean, Sam Steele is a nice prospect. Isaac Lundestrom is a nice prospect, but this is not a team that has a whole lot to go off of right now down the middle. Ryan Getzlaf is really being asked to carry the mail. And then on the wings, you've got a Henrique, who's typically a center. You've got Max Comtois, Max Jones, who, although they've looked quite good lately, they're still not guys you can totally count on yet. And then Nick Delorier. And then we've already talked about the right wing. So this forward group is just extremely cobbled together. And I don't mean that as a negative towards the players. There's just a lot of guys being asked to do things that in an ideal world on a playoff team, they're probably not being asked to do that. But that just kind of further cements that this season isn't really about maximizing each minute, maximizing each line. It's really just about, okay, let's get these guys opportunities.
Yeah.
Let's get them into high leverage moments. Let's give them a competitive environment to go into, because that's something that gets talked about a lot is, hey, sure, you can pull the plug on a team, on a franchise, and go into rebuild mode, but what does it do to your prospects if for 2 years, every game they're going into, they probably don't really expect to win, right? That's tough. And so I think, you would probably rather just maximize your chances at getting that top pick. But for this Ducks team, I do think in the long run, it's probably better for these young players to actually be in games where, hey, you're going to get some wins, you're going to be in close games, and you're going to learn something from it. And I think also, now to just really zoom out, I think Dallas Eakins, even if he's not necessarily, I don't think he's really shown to be a great X's and O's guy so far. I think he is a guy whose personality I trust to carry those types of players through these times.
Yes.
Right? Will he be the Ducks coach on the other side of this rebuild?
Knows?
But as of right now, I think he is a good kind of guy to just have at the wheel.
Well, yeah, because everything we've heard about Dallas Eakins in interviews is he's a guy that coaches every player differently. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what you need in these situations where you're going to have a lot of growing pains. You're going to have a lot of rough times. You're going to have veterans that are going to be frustrated. You're going to have young kids that, for the most part, these kids, they've won at every level they've played in. They haven't dealt with failure at a level that they're probably going to experience this season, more likely than not. And you have to be able to have gone through that. And as much as we all try to not talk about the Edmonton time for Dallas, I think that that's also something he can take away to be able to use as a learning experience for himself, to be able to how to handle this with his players, to not have that same type of situation happen and be able to coach each player differently. And I think that that is a positive thing for this Ducks team moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to touch on tonight's game? Because I personally did not get a chance to watch the game, so I don't want to speak too much on it. I was driving back from the holidays, making the treacherous drive. But Erik Gudbranson scored, and he's now one shy of his career high set in 14-15 with Florida.
So basically tonight's game, for those of you listening, kind of utilizing this for the recap portion of it, which there are people out there that do listen to us for the recap. So really kind of a weird game. Erik Gudbranson scores first shift of the game. Ends up kind of almost being a knuckle puck in a way, kind of drops a little bit, finds between the elbow and the body of Brian Elliott. And then later on in the period, kind of the Flyers are really starting to control play. Really bad turnover by Sam Carrick trying to break out of the zone. And this is a situation where everyone harps on Daniel Sprong and his poor defensive play, but then you see this from guys like that are supposed to be good in their zone. middle of the ice, throws a blind backhand pass trying to find Getzlaf on the wing, ends up throwing it right onto a Flyers stick. Flyers then take that puck and put it in the back of the net. Now, granted, some poor defensive zone coverage by Manson on that play, but part of it all comes back to the fact that that puck should have gotten out of the zone at that situation. The second period was just the John Gibson show, and that was the story of this game, was that the Ducks really looked flat in the second period. None of the lines. I mean, Ryan Getzlaf looked good. It felt like nobody could kind of capitalize on what he was creating, but the only line as a whole that looked like they were going was the Steele, Kasha, Jones line. Deloria, Shore, Rowney also was pretty good. Both of them were above 50%, but the second period was just bad, and John Gibson really bailed them out hard, and then the Ducks were able to kind of come back in the third, create some decent chances as they were going along, but nothing of note completely. Brian Elliott did come up big, just as John Gibson did in the third period. But the thing I really do want to talk about from this game that is the big talking point, in my opinion, is, and this is something that you can touch on because it's an overarching theme for this Ducks team, not just this year, but ever since it's been introduced, that it seems like the strategy that the Ducks have for 3-on-3 is just poor. And I don't know even if at this point it's a coaching thing as much as it is a personnel thing, because it's been this way for multiple different coaches for the Ducks. I think Boudreau was the coach of the Ducks when 3-on-3 was first introduced, and they were like this back then. And it's a really weird way that they play, in the sense of it's very slow and it's very kind of stalling, trying to find that space, and it ends up almost just being one-on-one battles that you have to win, where it's all three guys coming up the ice, and it ends up with a one-on-one in every situation, and the guy with the puck needs to make a play to beat a guy. And it's never a guy kind of making speed off the puck, different things like that, to be able to jump in behind the play. And then it kind of ends up where the Ducks get counter hit with a guy jumping up and getting behind them. And it seems like the Ducks roster, a lot of, specifically the defensemen in Fowler and Lindholm, who are out there a lot for the 3-on-3 situations, just play it very conservatively. And the thing is, you can't play 3-on-3 conservatively, because if you do, you're going to get caught no matter what. It's just going to happen. No matter how conservative you play, with that much space, a guy blows a tire, you're going to have a guy with an odd man chance coming your direction. And so you need to be able to attack, and get it into their zone. I'm not exactly opposed to bringing it back to hold possession, but you can't just slowly, proddingly enter the offensive zone, which is what happened tonight in various different situations. And I feel like the only time that we see something different is when the kids are on the ice, because they've come up playing this style. And in the AHL, they played a very different way of playing 3-on-3 than they are right now. And it seems like something's off, and at some point something has to change, because they've played 3-on-3 the same way. I mean, the only time that playing it conservatively was a smart strategy wasn't it like a year or two ago, that essentially when Connor McDavid was on the ice, they just kind of played keep away in their own zone until he got off the ice and then attacked?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think 3-on-3 is a bit odd. I think that the format is tough, because you basically have to pick your poison. You're either going to attack right away and just live with the results, and you have to get back quickly, or you kind of defend a little bit and then you try to get that counterattack. But either way, I mean, I hate watching teams play it that way, because it's not really entertaining.
Yeah.
It kind of takes away from what 3-on-3 was intended to be, which is this up and down, really frantic pace. And instead it's just kind of become this game of chess, which, I mean, you put video coaches all over it, and they're going to find a way to make it less entertaining. But that's just the way it's gone. I don't really have much of a take on that, to be quite honest. This has been your kind of shtick for the last 2 years now.
I don't think this has been really my shtick.
You've harped on this severely, at least more than I have.
Well, my shtick has been just that 3-on-3 shouldn't be viewed.
Well, you hate 3-on-3.
No, I don't hate it. I just think it shouldn't be viewed that differently than the shootout.
Yeah.
I think that the people that despise the shootout need to understand that 3-on-3 isn't that much different.
I would personally prefer to just go straight to the shootout.
I actually agree with that.
Because 3-on-3, there's still an injury risk, right? And it's really not. I don't find it that much more entertaining. I mean, it can be. There's still the off game where it looks like what it looked like in the beginning, but I just feel like those games are getting fewer and fewer.
That is a bold take that I guarantee you people are going to probably disagree with both of us on for that, but I don't know. I mean, what are you realistically?
I want the game to be over, and I want to be entertained, and I want there to be a winner.
Well, and here's my thing on it is that at the end of the day, people get mad at losing a game in a shootout because you're losing it in a skills competition. It doesn't feel like it's justified.
Yeah, but the shootout has been around for a long time. I mean, it's been around for a long time. It's been part of international hockey for 20 years.
What's the difference though between everything's a skills competition? You're essentially you're modifying the rules of the game for both situations. It's not different. People can say that they are essentially with 3-on-3, at least it resembles hockey because there's passing and things like that. But at the same time, it's so different because of how it's set up. It's not in the same way as 5-on-5. It's a completely different thing. That guy, Bobski, said bold take straight to shootout in a best of 7 format instead of best of 3.
Yeah, see, that I would be in favor of. Or just do best of 5 and then, give the shootout a little bit more of length.
Yeah,
because
I think
best of 3 is too short.
It's a little bit too short.
I enjoy the shootout. I'm just a fan. I've always been a fan. Anyway, let's go into our second break here. And then once we're done with that, we are going to get into some listener questions. So we'll be right back. Okay, back from the second break. So any final thoughts on the games that we saw this weekend, the Ducks moving forward, roster concerns, anything that comes to mind here?
I do want to mention, has to do with the Ducks, but also doesn't have to do with the Ducks.
Okay.
Trevor Zegras.
I was going to say, 7 assists in 3 games. Is that good?
Including 4 assists in, 4 minutes and 44 seconds of ice time over 2 periods?
Yeah. I mean, when you play with Arthur Kaliev, it's just...
That game he didn't play with Kaliev, though.
It's easy to get those assists.
3 of the 7 assists are on Kaliev.
I actually have not. So for those who don't know, Trevor Zegras, the Ducks' 9th overall pick this past draft, first rounder. The hopes of the franchise ride on him in some ways. And he's definitely looking good and filling in that potential in one of the most noteworthy tournaments of the year.
Yeah, so for those of you that haven't been paying attention and kind of this is your fill-in, the U.S. played Canada, what would that have been, on Boxing Day? So
lost.
On Thursday, they lost to Canada. Trevor Zegras was in a 4th-line role, I believe, playing on the wing also, not at center where he's been playing for Boston University. But he came up with, I believe he had 2 assists in that game, or was it just 1? I'm trying to check really quickly. He had 1 assist on the power play, with only getting 10 minutes of ice time, assisted on Kaliev's goal, so it was a primary assist. The U.S. did lose 6-4. Alexis Lafreniere looked insanely good.
And then got injured against Russia, which is extremely disappointing.
The supposed first overall pick, and he looked the part against the U.S. I believe he had a 4-point game, 1 goal and 3 assists in that game, and looked dominant in the process. And then the U.S., I believe on Friday, they played Germany, and Trevor Zegras started in the 4th-line role again, on the wing, had 4 primary assists. The first 4 goals for the U.S., he assisted on all of them, and the U.S. ended up winning the game 6-3. I believe he was elevated into a bigger role today and had 2 more assists in today's game, both on Kaliev's goal. The assist against Canada was insanely nice. It was on the power play, ends up getting the puck, I believe, from Turcotte, receives the puck from behind him, brings it between his legs, has a backhand pass, finds Kaliev on the power play, finishes it. On the game against Germany, looked good, including one of the assists where he was behind the net and did kind of a spin around pass to find, I forget who finished it, but Really nice play. And then today, one of the passes set up one of the Kaliev goals was a cross-ice feed that I don't know how you see the space there to make that pass. So he looks really good. Everyone says he probably looks like the best player on the U.S. right now, and not Cole Caulfield.
Well, give it time. Give it time. Sure. But yeah, I mean, it's. I haven't actually watched the World Junior yet, but it sounds like. I mean, everything I've read, it seems like it's been really entertaining. I mean, you have the controversy of Barrett Hayton not taking his helmet off for the Russian national anthem,
and then people getting mad at for the apology,
and then fake apologizing. You have Canada losing to Russia 6-0.
Well, that group is just kind of crazy right now.
I kind of buy that theory though, that after a huge game against USA the day before, it's tough to get right back up against Russia like that. That being said, it's like this. That's the nature of these tournaments.
Yeah,
well,
it's crazy because the U.S. has beaten Russia and Germany. Canada has beaten the U.S. but lost to Russia. The Czech Republic have beaten Russia but lost to Germany. Germany has lost to the U.S. And beat the Czech Republic.
Yeah.
Russia is like every team's. The U.S. I believe in 3 games has 6 points. Canada, Czech, Germany have 3 points in 2 games. Russia has 3 points in 3 games, and you get 3 points for a win. So a regulation win.
Really though, the highlight of the tournament, Nils Hoglander for Sweden with the lacrosse style goal from behind the net. But the craziest one you'll ever see, because he starts his move on one post and then scoops it all the way around the net to the other post and scores. That was insane. And it's not the first time he's done it. He did that in the Swedish league as well. So just a fun tournament. I definitely need to watch some games.
And we should make mention that Lucas Dostal, I don't know if he started for the Czech and the loss to Germany, but he did start in their win against Russia, which was a very big deal. And so he's looking very good for the Czech Republic.
My favorite thing about this tournament is that there's a player on Switzerland called David Abisher, who's a defenseman, who's not the David Abisher that was the goalie for the Avalanche. Anyway.
Wow. What a very obscure reference.
Yeah, David Abisher. I mean, everyone knows who that is, right?
I mean, I know who he is. Still a very obscure reference.
Yeah. Well, just keeping it obscure for the pod. All right,
let's get into some questions here.
Let's do some questions.
Zenazé asks us, question: how do Shore and Grant compare now that Shore has been able to string together a few games in the lineup in that fourth line role?
Well, it's tough to say. I think that I really need to see more, because as good as I think Devin Shore has been, particularly with his goal against Vegas, I mean, I can't really place that above Derek Grant, because Derek Grant has been making plays all season and getting big moments, whether it's scoring or, winning faceoffs defensively. So I think it's kind of a wash so far. I'm not really ready to say that, Devin Shore has just been this huge positive, whereas Derek Grant, definitely has had his struggles at 5-on-5, but has, I think, been a value add overall, in other facets of the game.
Yeah. So I did want to make mention. So against Vegas, that fourth line was one of the worst lines for the Ducks, as compared to in tonight's game.
So maybe that says more about. So maybe the numbers of that line say less about the center, whoever's centering them, and more maybe about the wingers, because we've always assumed, Carter Rowney is this solid fourth liner, but. Maybe not the case.
Then again, tonight, 55%.
And also Nick Delorier.
So, I think that it's looked fine. I do want to see a little bit more. I don't know. I'm not the biggest Derek Grant fan, so I think I personally would like Devin Shore there a bit more. Sure. Let's go with that. Real quick, I forgot to mention, if you want to find this show, you can find it at YouTube. We do a stream of the show we post the recorded version of the stream of the show at YouTube. You can search for us by searching for the AC Pod. If you want to like the videos, if you want to subscribe to the channel, comment there. We'll read through the comments if we see anything we will either respond to it or make mention of it. We also have the recorded version of this show where you can find it at Spotify. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, any of your favorite podcast services. But the real fun thing is our Twitch stream. You can find it at twitch.tv/acpod, where you can interact with us live. You can interact with other people in the Twitch chat, and you also have the ability to help support this channel. You can subscribe to this channel. If you have Amazon Prime, you get one free Twitch Prime sub each and every month. You do have to hit that subscribe button after 30 days. We do have 2 new Twitch subs. That guy Bobski88 and Kempafu actually resubbed for 10 months. So thank you so much. You get special emotes in the chat. We will prioritize your questions on busier nights. And actually, there's a pretty good emote in there that pretty much shows what happened in tonight's game with the fact that there's a Gibson with a halo over it. So,
yeah, Gibson was good tonight, but getting into a question here with that guy's
that guy
Bobski's. I didn't mean to say that guy, but that's actually his name. That guy Bobski88's question: if we're still sticking next year, what are the odds Dostal gets the nod? We get assets for Gibson. I mean,
Dostal would really have to impress.
Yeah.
I don't see it happening, though.
Yeah, exactly. And to be fair, John Gibson I think we're entering the territory of just has not been good this season. If you look at his save percentage, so this is a metric on Money Puck, save percentage above expected, he's at negative 0.749%. So he's below guys like Anders Nielsen, Laurent Brossoit.
It hasn't been the best season for him.
He just hasn't been good. I don't really know what else to say at this point.
Yeah.
There's no objective with the caveat that the data we have is just the publicly available stuff. Although I think people shouldn't just dump on stuff just because it's not the privately owned, confidential data, whatever. There's just no objective argument to be made with the information we have that he's been this kind of standout performer this year. And if you look at the model for Evolving Wild, and their goals saved above expected, just to give you an idea of where he ranks, you have to go to the next page to get to John Gibson's stats at this point. He's not even in the top 50. So again, he's been so good in the past that I am definitely willing to give him some time to figure that out. I don't think that this is an indication that John Gibson is all of a sudden not good anymore, but we have to point it out. We can't just kind of gloss over that either.
Yeah, I definitely do agree with that. I would expect a rebound, though, from him second half of the year and probably to see those numbers rebound a little bit there.
He's got a ways to go. He's 53rd right now with a negative 6.75 goals saved above expected. So,
yeah. Let me see. Babyist of Yoda asked a question kind of along these lines. Are we getting Lord Gibson back? Looked better a lot better over the last couple of games. NJ Devils fan said, question, early trade deadline. Who do you guys want the Ducks to get at the trade deadline?
I mean, yeah, that's a good question, Jake. If we're assuming they're acquiring players, who are they bringing in?
I mean, the player that I actually would love to see the Ducks bring in, this is in an ideal world, someone that could very much help the Ducks and in their biggest place of need would be a Tony DeAngelo type player.
So someone their biggest area of need is not their forwards?
I think, they have a lot of areas.
I actually disagree with that wholeheartedly, but continue.
I think they need more help on the blue line.
Really? Their top 2 pairings have been good.
I think that they need more help on the blue line for moving forward. They need someone young who can come in. I think if we're not looking necessarily at this year, we're looking at long term.
Sure. I've decided I wouldn't want to have to watch Tony DeAngelo just based off his Twitter feed.
I haven't even looked at his Twitter feed. So
he's an annoying person on Twitter. Let's just put it that way.
Okay. So a right-hand shot defenseman who can play on the power play that is under 24, 25 years old.
Oh, God. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that's the type of player. That's the archetype that they should be targeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll see. Now, in terms of what we expect from the Ducks at the trade deadline, quite honestly, I expect them to do a lot of nothing. I don't really expect them to be super active, and I don't see Bob Murray selling any players.
Maybe like a Derek Grant.
Maybe flip Derek Grant when he still has, when he has value. Now, I do think there is an argument to be made for sure that this team should be looking to sell.
Yeah.
And sell. I mean, really, this team should be looking to sell everyone. I'm not saying that, because that, I think that's what will happen. I'm not saying that because I necessarily think trade everyone, but I'm just saying they should be in a selling mindset because they have a lot of money that's tied up for the next few years, and you're kind of wondering, notably the Silverberg and Henrique contracts.
Here's an interesting comment by Zenez. Do you think that Erik Gudbranson, with his time and the way he's played with the Ducks, because he has been surprisingly good, I think we can both agree upon that he has been good with the Ducks so far this year. Do you think that they should try to flip him? Or do you think they could flip him?
No. What you do with Erik Gudbranson is you re-sign him a year ahead of when he becomes a UFA.
Why? Why would you put that into the world?
Why are you such a downer on Erik Gudbranson? He's been legitimately good with the Ducks this season.
Okay. What contract do you think they should sign him to? What contract do you think they would sign him to?
7 times 7. Go for it. Well, look, here's the thing. He's got one more year left after this year at $4 million a season. I think if you're the Ducks, you do two things, right? It all depends on your mentality and your approach. You either, like you said, hey, he's turned into a nice asset. Why not flip him this season to a team that maybe could use a defenseman, right? I mean, there's seemingly never any shortage of interest for Erik Gudbranson around the NHL. Or you just kind of slow roll it and see, okay, what does he turn into this season? And then depending on where the team is at next year, maybe then you flip him as an expiring contract, right? I think that maybe you can even argue he has more value now, right? He's actually easier to trade in a way now because teams like the fact that he's not a pure rental, and that with the way he's playing, now that $4 million next year, it doesn't necessarily look like a bargain, but it looks a lot more palatable than it did when, I think before this season started at least.
You know what? I could actually, now that I thought about it a little bit, I could see the Ducks re-signing him to a 1-year deal or extending him this summer to a 1-year extension because of the expansion draft. I mean, that's something that we need to start talking about as part of the conversation, that you have to have players to meet your exposure requirements, and that may be what Erik Gudbranson is. Someone that is signed to meet that exposure requirement. Now, granted, that could also just be Jacob Larsson, and that's it. And then you don't have to have that. Because, so for those of you that don't remember, you have to have one defenseman and I believe 2 forwards that had played either 40 games in the prior season or 70 games over the prior 2 seasons and is under contract for the season after the expansion draft. You have to have those criteria met in your players that are exposed for the expansion draft. So that's why I mentioned if they signed him to a 1-year extension, he would be signed after the expansion draft. Thus, he would meet those requirements if, for instance, they didn't have Jacob Larsson available. If, for whatever reason, either he's not on the roster or whatever. So, because the Ducks, I mean, we did a Patreon episode, I think, last year on this. They're going to be in a tight situation when it comes to the expansion draft because all of the kids are available for it. I believe Josh Mahura is. I believe Sam Steele is. I believe Max Jones is. Troy Terry is. Max Comtois is not.
What you do is you trade Josh Mahura so that they don't take the other guys. You trade Josh Mahura for future considerations.
Yeah, you
just use the Shea Theodore playbook.
They're gonna
done
be
deal.
I know you're being a bit facetious. They're gonna be in a tough spot though, like actually.
Yeah, well, we have plenty of time to get into that.
Sure.
What we don't have plenty of time to get into, and what we need to get into is
we have 2 more questions that I do.
Questions.
So yes. I have 2 from Twitter that were brought up that I did want to bring up. Our good buddy Kestrel Scott, feel better Scott, by the way. Hope you're doing good. Said, how do you feel about Lundstrom has been doing since his recall?
I think he looks good. I think he looks better than Sam Steele.
Wow, that is bold.
I don't think it's that bold considering, I mean, Sam Steele has, let's see, he had a decent start production-wise, but now if you look at his numbers on the season, he's at 12 points in 34 games, and he had 8 assists after about 20 games. So he's cooled off tremendously, and he's been pretty much a negative defensively. So Isaac Lindstrom, to me, just looks a lot more solid with the puck, without the puck. The numbers, I mean, it's kind of tough to delve into those in terms of the impact metrics just because he hasn't played a lot of games, so there's not enough of a sample, but he just looks better to me. And it's actually shouldn't be that surprising because what is the calling card of Isaac Lindstrom? It's that he was a really responsible, productive center in Sweden in his draft year, right? Showing some maturity there. Whereas Sam Steele, I mean, really, if you look at what kind of got the hype going, it's that he had 131 points in his, in his third junior season. And so I don't know. It was his third junior season. He had 131 points, and then 66 games. Like that actually happens a lot in junior.
Well, no,
where the older players tend to feast.
No, his biggest year was his draft plus 1 year. It wasn't his draft plus 2 year.
No, it's plus 2.
His biggest season was draft plus 1.
Well, he had, in terms of, what are you talking about? He had 70 points in 72 games in 2015-16.
That was his draft year.
Yeah, and then the next year he had 100, but he had already played 2 years of junior in his draft year. He had played the year before.
Yeah, it was his draft plus 1 season, which is the big part there, though.
He had already played 2 years before.
The years of experience isn't as big of a deal. The bigger thing is a big deal. The bigger thing is the age. The age is the bigger thing because of maturity and different things like that. Draft plus 1, yes, you see guys do it, but if it was draft plus 2, then that's more normal to see because he's a 19-year-old doing this to 16-year-olds. Draft plus 1, or 19 to 20-year-old. Draft plus 1, he's an 18 to 19-year-old.
All right. Well, now this just sounds weird, but yeah, he definitely. I don't know. I think that there was a lot of hype because of those numbers. I think overall, I'm just not really that excited about his upside based on what I've seen this season. But Isaac Lindstrom actually does show you things on a more consistent basis. Now, again, I'm not writing off Sam Steele, but it's just harder for me to get real excited about his upside just watching him this year, because I think that the not necessarily the deficiencies in his game, but the things that we've kind of known, that we've kind of thought for a long time now that, hey, he's a skilled player, but he's not incredibly gifted physically, and he's not necessarily, the most dominant offensively. All of those different things I think have manifested themselves this season. He just looks like a guy who's probably going to be like a third line, maybe a second line center, which is fine. But, if we're talking about the Ducks expansion draft and being really afraid of losing guys, I don't think it's actually that terrible of a position to be in, because obviously it would suck to lose a guy for nothing. But I don't know of the Ducks' current crop of prospects if there's necessarily a guy right now outside of Trevor Zegras, you're just we just cannot lose that guy.
Yeah, fair. So I got this question also, and we'll get to the rest of the ones from the Twitch chat in a minute. But a DM from William Lewis, who is a listener to the podcast, I believe, from overseas, I think, potentially, said, question for the pod, are the Ducks likely to sell at the trade deadline? And thinking as a GM from another team, do they have anything worth trading for? So we've talked a little bit about wish list, but if you're a GM of another team, who do you want to try to get from the Ducks?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think that the guy that I'm targeting if I'm a rival GM is Josh Manson, because he's 28. He's still, I think around the league is probably seen as a good, solid top 4 defenseman. I don't think he's been great this season at all. I think this might be one of his worst seasons to date. Now, the numbers next to Lindholm have looked good, but I think I'm starting to think that that's more Lindholm, at least as far as this year goes. But he still has that reputation around the league, right? And he's got 3 years left on his deal at a very reasonable number, $4.1 million. And so I think that he's a guy who could have a lot of trade value. Now, I know that he's the assistant captain. He's a mainstay on their blue line. He's not a guy that I think that they would want to trade just from an kind of culture perspective. But I think, look, if you're trying to sell, the point of selling stuff is to get stuff in return, to get value. And I think Josh Manson has probably one of the highest trade values on this roster. I think it's probably him behind Rickard Rakell, your own favorite trade piece, who's got 3 years left at 3.7, which is a ridiculous bargain deal. But if I'm teams always need, like we talked about with the Ducks, teams always need help on the blue line, and Josh Manson, I think, would fill a need for a lot of teams as that kind of third pairing guy. And if he just turns out to be like a third pairing defenseman on a team that he goes to, that's still fine because his cap hit isn't that crazy. So you're not really overpaying for that role, and you all of a sudden feel really good about the role he's in.
Yeah. My only kind of rebuttal to you on that with Manson is I don't know if I would be trading anyone from the blue line at this point in time, simply because there's not exactly anyone coming up. I guess Josh Mahura has really kind of taken that next stride, but I don't really know outside of him if there's anyone who looks like they're going to be able to take those roles or take a spot.
Right. So but here's my question. What is the upside of keeping Josh Manson?
I mean,
what is the value that he is filling?
It gives you a right shot defenseman for the top pairing. And,
sure, but
we've seen the Ducks without. I think the only way.
What is your goal here? What is the Ducks' goal in the next 2-3 years?
Fair. The only way I would trade him,
like if the Ducks were a competitive playoff bound team right now, obviously you don't trade Josh Manson, but he doesn't really serve a functional purpose in the grand scheme of this team. He's 28.
Yeah, that's fair.
If that number was 29 or 30,
yeah,
people would probably be viewing it a little differently. But he's on that verge of when he might start just not being good. But regardless, he's a guy who, because of the way he came into the league, he's on a super team-friendly deal, and he's not going to be a UFA again until probably his actual value goes down. So I think he gets you a lot, or maybe not a lot, but he gets you something, and that's kind of what the Ducks need. And hey, if the residual effect is that the Ducks are slightly worse defensively, maybe increasing their draft odds, like I don't see that as necessarily a bad outcome either.
Yeah, I'd be hesitant, but I get what you're saying. All right, so let's get into these quick questions. Brandon Pineda asked us, considering the trajectory of the team this year, assuming these type games go the way they have, do you think that we will end up with a top 5 pick? And who's your best choice / fit for us? So if you want to take that first part, I've got actually Corey Pronman's athletic article with the current draft grades up for this upcoming draft. So do you think that the Ducks are probably going to end up in a position to get a top 5 pick?
Well, right now, the Ducks are third to last in the Western Conference. So, yeah, absolutely. They're in a position to do that now.
At worst, they would get 6th.
Now, to be fair, they are only, quote-unquote,
third in the Western Conference. Sorry.
They are, quote-unquote, only 8 points out of the final wildcard spot, and they are 9 points out of the third spot in the Pacific. So they're not necessarily dead in the water in terms of their season, right? If they go on some miraculous run and other teams in front of them falter a little bit, there's still definitely a universe where the Ducks make the playoffs. But if you look at the probabilities, I mean, they're at 14% right now to make the playoffs on Money Puck. So, I mean, that's kind of where this thing is headed. And if you look at the probability to win the draft lottery, the Ducks right now are at number 4 with the 7.4% chance, which is what that would be a great outcome for this season if the Ducks get a top 5 pick.
All right.
So and by the way, just to salt the wound a little bit, the Sharks have the third best odds, but do not own their pick.
Yeah, goes to Ottawa. Ottawa could make out really well this year.
Ottawa could get the first 2 picks,
which is hilarious because they were the team last year that was the butt end of everyone's joke.
Yeah, how quickly the tides have turned.
Yeah, crazy. So real quick, here's Corey Pronman's quick rankings. Number 1 overall would be, and he categorizes them with different kind of descriptors. Special NHL prospect. The only one in this draft is Alexis Lafreniere, who's a winger and really showed why he's in that category above everyone else in the game against the U.S. Special / elite bubble is Quentin Byfield, who is a center. Elite NHL prospect at third is Alexander Holtz, who plays for Djurgården in the Swedish Hockey League, and he's a winger. Lucas Raymond, who plays for Frölunda, who's a left winger. And then, so those are fourth. Elite high-end bubble at fifth is Yaroslav Askarov, who's a goalie. So I don't foresee the Ducks being there. High-end prospect after that at 6 is Cole Perfetti at a left winger. Then Jamie Drysdale, who's a defense. Tim Stutzel, left winger in Germany. Marco Rossi, who's a center in Ottawa. So there's the top 9. And the worst of those players are high-end NHL prospects. So there is that. And after, so you said you haven't really seen that much of Trevor Zegras so far in this tournament, right?
Well, the question was about who you could see them getting, right?
Well, no. So just like they just want to know who they were, but I'm transitioning now. Ken Pafu asked us, do you think Zegras will be even half as good as he is in the World Juniors? Did we just get a mini Getzlaf? And
yeah, I would temper anything that you see in the World Juniors.
Yep, was going to say that.
Like, there's been definitely guys who have had standout World Junior performances who then don't really go on to have great NHL careers and vice versa. I mean, you see guys who don't really stand out in the World Juniors and then doesn't necessarily hurt their long-term trajectory. So yeah. Trevor Zegras is slated as a high-end playmaker, a high-end offensive center, and he's basically what you're almost looking for in the World Juniors is, especially with a guy of his caliber, is just, okay, is he at least meeting the impression that we've had of him so far? And the answer to that is yes. So yep. I wouldn't jump out of my seat. I mean, it's obviously exciting if you're a fan of the team.
It's fun. It's fun to have a player that you can be invested in the tournament. It's always way more fun, especially when they're on the team that you want to root for. I remember I think the most fun World Junior was the 2013 one. That was also mainly because there was no NHL hockey at that point in time, so that was all we had.
Well, John Gibson.
Yeah, and then you had John Gibson. I mean, that 2013 U.S. team was stacked. It had Johnny Gaudreau, Jacob Trouba, Seth
Alex
Jones.
Galchenyuk.
Yeah. All right, I can't tell if there was like some longing, wishing he was still on the Habs, or what that was there from you.
No, it's worked out perfectly. Max Domi, 70-point player.
Yeah, fair. All right, so I think that's probably gonna do it for us tonight. I don't really see any more questions. And yeah, so Tuesday up in the air. We are recording a Patreon episode tomorrow, which we will get into a little bit of the all-decade type things.
We will do that. Let's just tease that a little bit here, just to give at least people something to think about. So if you just had to think right now of your, let's say, starting 5 for the decade for the Ducks, like who just quickly comes to mind?
Getzlaf and Perry.
So my top 5 that I thought of today my starting 5.
Are we building a lineup?
No, I'm just giving you a starting 5. So 3 forwards, 2 D.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be center, left wing, right wing.
I would say it does for it does for the forwards, but for D, it doesn't have to be like right shot, left shot. I would go Raquel, Getzlaf, Perry, and then Fowler, Lindholm, and then Gibson and net. I feel like that's. I don't know if there's really any other serious candidates. Because Fowler, I think, has to be in there.
You maybe could take out Fowler and put in Vatanen.
See, no.
Maybe.
No. 0%. No, Fowler is in there to me. Fowler's in there. I mean, he's sure, and I'm saying this as a critic of Cam Fowler over the years, but he's played the entire decade, and he's...
maybe you could put Jakob Silfverberg there as compared to Rickard Rakell because the impact he had. And now, granted, he wasn't necessarily a left winger, but
I think that's actually probably more viable than Sammy Vatanen over Cam.
Probably. Hey, I'm just throwing out names, trying to be devil's advocate here. That one's not going
to go over well.
I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here, you know.
Yeah, but pick your spots.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Shea Theodore.
I do think Silfverberg, though, there's an argument for him maybe over Raquel because Raquel didn't really come on until like 2016,
which is about the same time Silfverberg did. Right around that same time.
Well, no, Silfverberg was good going back to 2014, 2014-15 season. So
yeah, it was different. He was more so in the defensive forward role.
Yeah, but he was also still scoring 20 goals a season. So
true.
It's not like he was just some slouch offensively either. So I don't know. I mean, I think that there's maybe a debate there, but Getzlaf and Perry, I think we can.
I mean, maybe
lock those in.
Maybe the defenseman. And now, granted, this is not a longevity argument, but season argument, you could maybe throw Lubomir Visnovsky in there because he led the NHL in points from a defenseman for the Ducks in the 2010-2011 season.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to put him in as like an on-roll mention, I think that's fine. But I think Cam Fowler has to be back there on D.
Yep.
And then Hampus Lindholm, I mean, hasn't been the flashiest like offensive producer, but he's just been so reliable, and he's been one of the best defensemen in the league at such a young age. So I would feel pretty confident about putting him in there. And then John Gibson in net. I mean,
maybe you could make the argument Freddie Anderson.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. It's tough to say.
It's kind of a coin flip, to be honest, between the two of them because of the impact that they both had during their times as starters.
Well, and then if you go back into in the beginning of the decade, I mean, those aren't necessarily the prime Jaguar years anymore.
Jaguar wasn't on the team.
Let's see here. So his last season,
he was traded, I believe, 2009.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, exactly. So it wasn't even on there.
We got prime Jonas Hiller. Yes, you had a little bit of Jonas Hiller when he was not Vertigo. Those seasons were good. What?
That's an interesting way of putting it.
When he was not feeling the effects of Vertigo.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, I mean, Jonas Hiller definitely had some standout moments, playoff moments as well. And I mean, played 5 seasons with the Ducks. I mean, that's in today's NHL. Sorry, 6 seasons. That's not nothing in today's NHL. But I would still give it to John Gibson just for the kind of overall excellence. I mean, Jonas Hiller's 2010-11 season with a .924 save percentage, playing 49 games, is probably in the top 5 Ducks goaltender seasons of the decade. But
he would have won the Vezina if he had not gotten hit in the head at the All-Star game.
But I think that John Gibson's best season, just John Gibson overall, I think rises above that a little bit. I don't know. Maybe that's recency bias.
It's a little bit of recency bias, but it's fair. I think that the issue that you have with Hiller is the distinct difference between that season and then after with Vertigo, because he was still good.
Well, he ran hot and cold. I mean, even before that,
he was really good that season.
It's interesting because his career arc with the Ducks, this is his save percentage by season. So .919 in 08-09, so before the decade, but then 09-10, .918, and then .924. So he was an above average starter for basically 3 years. Well, then he goes down to .909, .913, and .911. And so there's a very distinct,
and it's clear why.
Yeah, and I mean the problem with Frederik Andersen is that he just didn't play enough. I mean, he was the starter basically he was really just the true starter for one season where he had a .914.
2.5, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he played 28 games in 13-14. But, I can't put in a guy like I can't really use that so much. And then in 15-16, he played 43 games and had a .919. So, yeah, I think it's between Gibson and Hiller, probably. Yeah. Maybe you give the edge to Hiller, but I don't know. That's a tough one. Either way, so we're probably gonna. That was your preview for what our bonus episode is gonna look like tomorrow.
And we also will definitely get into Mandalorian talk. We're definitely gonna get into Star Wars talk.
Rise of Skywalker.
You have seen Rise of Skywalker.
I have seen it, and I have enjoyed it. So we will see. We will see what the debate will be. But that is going to do it for our episode tonight, guys. Once again, hope you had a great time with your families and just a great holiday overall. If this is indeed the last episode of the decade, well, it was a hell of a ride for the 3 years of the 10 that we did this. Hope you have a safe New Year's Eve if you're out there celebrating. Couple different ways, though, that you can support the show. Check us out on the Apple Podcast app. You can leave a rating and a review there. That goes a long way. But like Jake mentioned, we are on Patreon, and that's one way that you can support us financially to help this show going or to keep it going. So for $1 a month, it's a very small pledge, but you get a nice little reward. You get access to our patrons-only Discord chat. So during each game, that the Ducks play that are on Pacific Standard Time, or that are in that 7 p.m. Pacific window, we are going to be going back and forth in that chat, talking about the game, just complaining about different things. It's a lot of fun, and I do think for $1 a month,
always complaining about one thing in particular.
Yeah, and you get to find out what that is, and for $1 a month, hey, I think that it's a nice little perk. But for $5 a month, you still get access to that, and on top of that, you get 2 bonus episodes. And so, as you see, we definitely, keep it to kind of deeper hockey topics. So, like, talking about the Ducks more in depth, and also looking at league-wide topics. But we occasionally go off script, especially with this kind of Star Wars-filled holiday season that we've had, with The Mandalorian coming out and with The Rise of Skywalker now out and about. So we go a little bit everywhere on that show. It's a lot of fun. And again, that's 2 episodes a month for $5. Now, a couple different other ways that you can support us. Like I already said, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, but you can also subscribe to us on YouTube if you're more of a YouTube person. You can see our pretty faces as you're listening to the pod. So not sure, if that's necessarily a good thing, but, with that Twitch stream being recorded, you will definitely have access to that. And of course, if you're not on Apple Podcasts, you can always check us out on Spotify and on Stitcher. Make sure to check out AnaheimCalling.com. That's at Anaheim Calling on Twitter. Jake is on Twitter at ReindeerGames91. And I am on Twitter at Felix_Sicard. So that is going to do it for tonight's show. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And we will talk to you later this week. Have a good one.
Bye.